Hello and welcome to Inside the Americas. I'm Julia Kim. Coming up on the show, we go to Northern California, which has suffered the deadliest fires in its history. Thousands still don't know if their homes have burnt down. Our correspondent brings us an exclusive report from the ground. We also meet Brazil's first indigenous rapper, a 17-year-old who's using music to bring attention to the plight of his people. And Canadian winemakers are raising a glass to climate change. More on that later in the programme. First, we begin with our number of the week, 6,000. That's how many buildings were destroyed by the deadliest wildfires in California's history. Entire neighbourhoods in parts of the state's wine country were reduced to ash. Thousands still don't know if they even have homes to return to. France 24's Gallagher Fenwick followed one family's plight in Santa Rosa.
We'd like to go see our house.
Sorry?
We'd like to get into our house.
Okay, we're actually not allowing anybody to go back this way.
After days of waiting, Nancy and Ken Mazzoni are clearly upset.
That's the biggest crock of shit I've ever heard.
They're amongst the 75,000 Californians who received mandatory evacuation orders. They're determined to go home.
Go.
The husband distracts the officers on guard, while his wife sneaks away in the hopes of making it to their house. Authorities explain why they're not letting any residents through.
The county has to go through there and look for bodies.
Dead bodies.
And carcasses, so animals too.
Nancy tells us she has been living in this neighborhood of Santa Rosa for nearly 30 years.
That's my house. That's my house right there. This is my beautiful backyard.
Out here alone, thousands of structures have been reduced to ash and rubble. Nancy says she needed to see it for herself in order to begin grieving. She holds on to the hope that the cats she left behind somehow survived and will find their way home.
Our chairs are here, the baker's rack, everything is still here.
All right, bye. Well, Nancy got in. She was able to put some food out for our animals if they come back.
Like many others in Northern California, Ken and Nancy are now faced with the daunting task of having to rebuild their entire lives.
Well, over in Mexico, thousands are facing a similar situation. It's been 1 month since a 7.1 magnitude earthquake hit the capital, damaging some 8,000 homes. Many of these newly homeless people are still struggling to find a permanent solution. While wealthier residents grapple with rising house prices, those further down the property ladder feel forgotten by the government. Olivia Salazar-Winspear reports.
The leafy Condesa neighbourhood's known for its cafes, restaurants and cultural scene, but not for its safety when it comes to seismic activity. It was among the hardest hit zones in September's earthquake. Paula Navarrete lost her rented apartment here. Authorities allowed her back in to salvage a few clothes and her documents. Now, despite a rush on properties, she's hoping to move back into the area.
The truth is, we're hopeful that prices will soon drop a bit in the neighbourhood, because a lot of people are leaving. Since the day of the earthquake, there have been a lot of removal vans around.
1 month after the quake, some 600 people are still living in shelters, and it's believed many hundreds more have had to move in with family and friends. A state of limbo for those waiting to hear how the state will help them.
We'd like the government to help us build a house if it's going to be taken down completely, because everyone who has come here thinks they're all going to be demolished. So we're waiting for them to give us a definitive answer.
Others have already said goodbye to their homes as authorities begin to tear down properties in the Mexican capital. This 4-story apartment building crumbled in the quake, although miraculously no one was killed. Residents are now pulling what objects they can salvage from the wreckage.
When I came back to have a look, I saw that the only thing I had left were my photos, and that's if they managed to get them out.
Mexican safety officials have said their priority is eliminating properties that pose a danger to neighbouring structures or passers-by, and that they'll be demolishing between 150 and 200 buildings in the coming weeks. They say 90% of the damage caused by September's quake affected buildings from before the devastating earthquake of 1985, after which engineering standards were tightened.
Now, it's a vital weapon against climate change. The world's largest rainforest, the Amazon, absorbs vast amounts of carbon dioxide. Well, for the first time in 3 years, deforestation in the Amazon has fallen. Brazil's Environment Minister announced that it's dropped 16% compared to last year, thanks in part to a stepped-up government response against logging. But researchers say it's more likely due to Brazil's economic recession and a drop in livestock prices. The cattle industry is a major contributor to deforestation. Well, one Brazilian making a stand against deforestation is the country's first indigenous rapper, MC Kunumi. The artist comes from the long-persecuted Guarani tribe who once inhabited the rainforest. Now he and others like him live on an indigenous reserve near São-Paulo. Just 17 years old, Kunumi is using his music to fight for the rights of his people, and he's starting to get heard.
2 hours out of São-Paulo, the economic capital of Brazil, far from modern skylines, we find MC Kunumi in his village, one of the heartlands of the culture of the Guarani tribe.
I built this house long ago, but there are still things to do.
Just turned 17, MC Kunumi, real name Wera Jeguacá, is, according to Guarani culture, old enough to be married and a father.
It is a dream catcher. We put that above our bed to chase away bad dreams and sleep well at night.
Between tradition and modernity.
And that is our TV, to watch soap operas.
For more than 20 years, the Guarani have been fighting against their massacre and the illegal appropriation of their lands by big farmers. MC Kunumi became a symbol of their struggle. In 2014, just 13 years of age, he uses the World Cup opening ceremony to call for the demarcation of indigenous lands. Today, he fights with music. MC Kunumi is the first rapper of indigenous rights. To music inspired by the city and the words, in Portuguese and Guarani, inspired by his father, also a writer. Olivio taught him poetry, he transformed it into rap.
Since he was a kid, he's been a gifted writer. I did not push him to rap, but he watched clips on TV. And I understood that this music was important because in rap the words carry messages, and his words defend us.
No one knew about the indigenous people. They think that we live in the jungle in tranquility, but it's not like that at all. It is very hard for us to get by.
A taboo message in Brazil. In spite of his success on the internet, no radio station plays him. So, for the last few years, father and son have been crossing the region and the country to get their message across. Thanks to the support of the artistic community, MC Kunumi has just brought out his first album, My Blood is Red, a tribute to the land and the history of his people.
Now it's time for the photo of the week. And can you guess where this vineyard is? Maybe it's in France, California, or even Chile. Well, the answer is Canada. Climate change has sparked a wine-growing revolution in the French-speaking region of Quebec. Vineyards there are flourishing due to the region's warmer summers. France 24's Rebecca Rosman has more.
Fresh from the Canadian source. Restaurant goers in Montreal can now make a toast with a glass or a bottle of locally sourced white, red, and rosé wines. A hit among consumers who say they're proud to support regional products.
There's some interesting flavours. It's different from what I'm used to.
It's really affordable, especially for the quality, and it's becoming more well-known.
Véronique Dahl is a local sommelier. While her menu has traditionally consisted of French and Canadian wines, she's recently added more Quebec bottles to the list.
I don't know if we're going to be part of a larger market one day, but at the local consumer level, it's great that we can say we're really producing a high-quality product. We're making something good.
Last year, some 2 million bottles of Quebec wines were bought and sold in the region. The process starts here, in vineyards south of Montreal. This French winemaker was among the first to discover Quebec's grape-growing potential.
C'est beau, hein? C'est ça.
While it was a difficult start, He says climate change has had a positive impact on his business.
35 years ago, it would have been really difficult to get a good harvest. The season was much shorter, so we had fewer grapes that weren't always mature enough. We had to add a lot of sugar in order to raise the alcohol level.
No need to add sugar anymore, as Quebec's climate has increased by 3 degrees in the last 60 years. Wine growers can now even make European wines using grapes like these Muscat ones, which harvested for the first time this year. But the bitter cold -30-degree winters remain an issue, when the vines risk dying entirely if not carefully protected. For now, Quebec wine is only available in Canada, but wine growers say they're ready to pour into the international market.
Now, if you've ever said you're too chicken to pick up water sports, this next story is for you. Meet Loretta, a Rhode Island red hen who rules the roost when it comes to stand-up paddleboarding. Instead of being cooped up at home, this plucky bird is often seen on the blue waters of the Florida Keys. And it's no poultry feat. Free-roaming chickens are a common sight in the Florida Keys, but Loretta has a particular reason to be cocky. None of her feathered friends excel in water sports. Okay, well that's enough with the chicken jokes. Thanks so much for watching Inside the Americas. We'll see you again next week.
Across Africa, presented by Georgia Calvin-Smith.
From North to South Africa, from Bamako to Nairobi, from Accra to Mogadishu. Bringing you all the political, economic, cultural and social news from Africa for a better insight into an ever-changing continent.
Across Africa on France 24 and France24.com.